Yeah, so Lars, did you play one of those games in these old days? I mean, when was
Are you old enough?
Yeah.
Come on, no, you grew up.
I'm old enough for that. So my first Ultima I actually played was Ultima 5. I got to be honest, I don't remember like playing the game for a long time. But yeah, I did play the Ultima games. I bought every Ultima since then. So I did not have the original experience like the first ones that you created. Ultima 4 is a game that I recently checked after we met and talked a lot about the virtues, and I was actually watching some videos on YouTube and talked to a couple of friends who actually played Ultima 4. So I might try to relive that experience, but sometimes it's better you don't play.
Don't do it.
Yeah,
don't do it.
That's what I wanted to get at, because if you play games that have been released like in the 90s or even earlier than that, it always ruins your memory if you played them back in the day, because back in the day you had this vision of, oh my god, this game looks so amazing, and that you play it these days and like, I don't know, I had a different picture in mind when I last played it. So anyway, back to Ultima, I played those games, I pretty much all of them until Ultima 9. I was not like the biggest fan of Ultima 9, I gotta say, mostly because of technical issues I had. It was so incredibly painfully slow on my machine that I didn't have the greatest experience. But yeah, I love the Ultima games, and it was the first role-playing game for me ever. So, I missed the first part, but I loved the second.
Let me go back and just mention something too about the not going back. It's funny. While one of the things I'm proud of about Ultimas, about the whole series, is that I really do try to push the state of the art in as many ways as you could. User interface and technology for visualization and music and other things too. I could break down and talk about almost any one of those areas. But I'll talk about specifically the user interface just for a minute, just because I think it's an interesting marker of good ideas gone wrong that you would experience if you went back to Ultima 4. In a Calibeth, the kind of Ultima prequel, the user interface, there was by the return key, there was a right and left arrow and a kind of divide by key that would be near your thumb. And that was the closest you had to directional pad. So it made sense to make that be the directional movement with your right hand. And that meant the most convenient for other activities, just left your left hand here. And so at first, there was really just one thing to do. So it was sort of the do button, the X, do it. Move around and do things. Move around, do things. But then I needed a second key. And so that second key happened to be to like go in and out of things. And the E is nearby, so I used E for enter. So and then E and X. Well, by the next game, you needed a few more commands. And so I began to use letters that were nearby these, just because it's convenient. But the mapping of what the letter was almost, didn't really make any sense. But it was just because it was physically easy. But then after a while, I needed more commands and more commands and more commands. And so by the time you get up to Ultima 4, the commands use all 26 letters of the keyboard. So A meant attack, B meant board a vessel, C meant cast a spell, D meant drop an item, E meant enter, F was fire ship's weapons, G was to get something off the ground, H, I don't even remember, but basically literally all 26 letters.
So heal. Yeah.
Heal. No, because that would have been cast a spell followed by heal. That would have been a two-step. Oh, because after you ran out of 26, you had to do 2 levels, right? You meant use an item, but then you had to go scroll down your inventory.
You are the reason why they printed these handbooks,
It was terrible. So by the time you get up to Ultima 4, it is a impossible amount of keys you have to memorize and figure out how to use them. And then Ultima 5, the big innovation for Ultima 5, which is why I wouldn't go back that one step, is the mouse came into existence. Yeah. And with the mouse, I could extrapolate and say, picking up or dropping things is really sort of the same function of just grab it in and out of your inventory or out of the world and move back and forth. So there's just one icon that means do that sort of thing. And so it only became, a list of 10 icons of functions. And then by the time you get to Ultima 6, I realized those are really all the same thing too. I can really just do it context sensitive with the item in the world. So I don't even have to have those icons. And so it's just interesting to see the UI evolve. But again, one of the things I'm proud of is we were always just, with each new game, throw away everything you thought you knew and say, what's the best thing for a game now? And I still fight this battle to this day. Like how I'm fighting that battle right now on, we're settled now on Shroud of the Avatar, but the battle that I had with my own team on Shroud of the Avatar goes back to, if you're doing a role-playing game, how much of the traditional first-person shooter physical interface do you use versus how much of the RPG turn-based UI do you use, and how much you just invent from scratch. And I've always been fine to invent from scratch, but if you're the only one who does a particular interface out of all the games that are out there, it means people have to learn it.
And the problem is nowadays no one learn and to read the book before, because I remember back in my days when we bought a game, it was like something unique. It was like putting all the money on the table and say, yeah, all the savings are there. So you read the book before you even install the game.
You have this keyboard. Do you remember the keyboard?
There was overlay.
Yeah,
overlay.
Falcon 3.0.
Oh, don't talk about Falcon. Falcon had like a manual that was...
But that was cool.
Yeah, it was cool.
We flew to Baghdad. I knew that.
Usually I went to the bathroom and kind of read it before I actually started the game.
Yeah, but you know, these were the times. Okay, you have to put it there.
And people's tolerance for learning something new is now much lower.
Zero.
Yeah, and so that's actually one of the challenges that that you guys I think have dove right in on top of with the Switch and with VR is that there aren't that many standards, and so you're having to make it up. And I already noticed I was paying attention to the games you showed me. One of the things that I think is a very good thing that you guys are doing is amongst your own games, you're trying to keep your UIs similar. To where even if somebody else is doing something else, at least people who've played one of your games can sit down with the next one of your games and they'll already have some familiarity with the foundations of the interface. When you're inventing user interface, you've got to train people or keep it stable as much as you can.
Yeah, definitely, yes. So coming back to the next step, we said, okay, EA. Yeah, you left EA then.
I did.
So, the first most funniest thing I ever saw was Captain Hawkins. So I think a lot of guys never realize that there is a crave of Captain.
You mean Pert Snickwa. So you mean Trip Hawkins? So no. By the way, Pert Snickwa is in Shroud of the Avatar, also. By the way, and so the president of EA before we were acquired was a guy named Trip Hawkins.
Yeah, we know him. And he did mobile games then.
Yeah, with Digital Chocolate. Exactly. Yeah. So my first, we didn't even talk about the story of our first grievance with EA. EA actually sued Origin back in the time of Trip Hawkins, and back in the time of shelf space battles and things. And so we had a particular grievance with him. And he had a meeting with my brother Robert where he said, Robert, that's what I like about you, that you're so naive in the ways of business. And so it was the quote that he told my brother. And so we've sort of had this bad blood that has gone on for a while. But so we have an homage to him in Ultimas and in Shroud of the Avatar, where Trip Hawkins spelled backwards is Pert Snickwa.
Yeah.
And so he's always a pirate captain that's sailing around doing nefarious things. So you'll see a ghost ship in Shroud of the Avatar that is captained
saw that yet. So
Pert Snickwa. So yeah, I'm sure you haven't seen it yet either. So it's a pretty obscure detail in one obscure part of the game. But yeah, we still have an homage to Trip.
So never get an enemy to you. Or you get forever
into a game.
You want to be a pirate.
But by the way, but even friends, we made bad guys out of friends. Like Min Liang Tan, one of the founders of Razer. Seen it? Yep. If you look at Razer, do you have in your mind's eye what the logo is for Razer?
I do.
3 interconnected snakes in green. You know where the idea for that Razer logo came from? This necklace. And he's a big Ultima player. He was inspired to make their logo.
Can you
based
maybe
on,
show it to the?
Yeah. So this necklace, I made this when I was 11 years old. It's permanently attached to my neck. Actually, when I made it, I didn't know how to make a clasp, and there's actually no clasp on this.
So you cannot take it off.
I cannot take it off. It's been on my neck since I was 11, and so it's sort of become my thing.
So you have no problem at airports?
No, because it's made out of silver. It's a misnomer that it looks for metal. It's actually looking for ferrous metal, so it has to have iron in it to set off the metal detector.
Okay,
silver won't set it off. And Min Liang Tan is a backer, a Kickstarter backer of Shroud of the Avatar. So we're just like, hey, how would you like to be in the game? Who do you want to be? So he said, I want to be a bad guy. So he's a bad guy. And the Razer logo's in the game too. We had to get permission from their marketing department, but you'll see a dark tower with the Razer logo on the front of it, and you'll find Min Liang Tan up in the top of it. So yeah, so if you want to be good guys or bad guys, we gotta. There's 1,000 people in the game. Come on, we were actually just talking about how Lars is going to be in the game. So
I got to be a good guy. Well, I'm not in the game yet. I have to be a good. I can never be the evil guy. Never. In real life and in the game, I always have to be the good guy.
So we literally were just working on this just over yesterday and today. So it was how to cast him in.
So. Or you did the D&D thing, all these characters.
No, rolling.
We could, but no.
Well, that's actually one of the innovations of Ultima 4 was, no
dice rolling.
Well, not only do you not roll your character, but the word avatar, that's where, the word avatar that everybody uses now, the reason why everybody uses it is because of Ultima 4.
Yep.
But there's a rationale for why that became true. It's not just an arbitrary word. When I moved the game from, if you play most role-playing games, you're playing the role of a character, right? And so it would be perfectly reasonable to role-play Conan the Barbarian. And so if you role-play Conan, I think you should succeed or fail by how well you embody Conan. And so if Conan believes the best things in life are, killing your enemies and driving them before you and hearing the lamentations of their women, Crom, you should win or lose based on how well you embody that. And when I decided I wanted to do games about virtue, I said, it's important that the character you are playing is not Conan, because then you should be expected to behave like Conan. It's important to me that the character is you, not your alter ego. You're not playing your evil sidekick. It has to be you, the Earth human, who is responsible for the dastardly deeds that you might perform in this world. So the decisions that you make have to be you. And so while I was doing research to figure out virtues like truth and love and courage that I wanted to talk about, I was reading, biblical texts and other religious texts, Buddhist texts, and I was reading some Hindu texts when looking for, good quotes and ideas and ways to structure virtue stories. And I came across the word avatar. And in Hindu faith, the word avatar is used for the projection of a deity in human form on Earth. So if Vishnu, the elephant god, manifested on Earth in human form to go see how the humans were doing and fit in with the locals, that was Vishnu's avatar. And I thought, well, that's what I need. I said, that's exactly what I want this to be. It's not your alter ego, it's you. And so that's when I created the concept of these moon gates that would be the transportation method for you to actually come to this world. And even though you might change physically to being, instead of getting a little computer nerd, some buff, heroic Schwarzenegger type, it is still your avatar, your projection into this virtual world. And part of that to me was no dice rolling.
Yeah.
Instead, I did this series of questions. I began to query you and ask you what's important to you in life. What things do you value over other things? And based on that, if you're saying courage and valor and other stuff, then you become more like a fighter and you become more buff. If you're saying truth and wisdom and knowledge, you become more like a mage or an alchemist. And if you said, love and caring and sharing, you become more like a bard or a ranger kind of type. And I thought that was a good innovation too. That is now, it's really funny because just like I was mentioning yesterday, that I'll occasionally have somebody tweet me like, hey, I see your Ultima did this like this other game, and I have to point out to them that they asked me, did I take it from that game? I have to go, well, wait a minute, my game was 10 years before that game you think I took it from, so it's the other way around.
Yeah. So inspiration for everyone. So no matter if it's Avatar stuff, and now, what do you think then when you see a movie like Avatar? Do you say, yeah, shit?
That's my idea.
Yeah, well, what's interesting is James Cameron doesn't really know me. We've met, but we've actually been business partners in a submarine before, but just because of some fractional things that we both own. But I've never had the guts to talk to him and say, hey, I invented that word in this modern context. I don't think he'd take it well. And I don't think he took it from Ultima either, by the way. I think it was independent. But, what's interesting of... what this does teach me though is whenever we all hear game pitches, we are all talking about how tons of people come to you to try to get you to make their idea, and I'm always of the opinion that if someone internally or externally, if somebody ever has the idea of, I'm a really big fan of first person shooter X, but what I think it really needs is innovation Y, and we should go make that. It's clear that most gamers' inspirations come from other games. And if your inspiration only comes from within our own field, you're very unlikely to come up with anything particularly original. I think unless you're going to go do the research way outside of games, unless you're going to go and say, not I look at every movie that exists, but read, philosophy and history and understand, cosmology, and science deeply and math deeply, unless you're really willing to go study way outside the core thing you're making, I think it's very hard to do original work, or at least it is for me. I mean, there are other people who have other methods, but at least mine is to range far afield for inspiration.
No, I actually agree. I actually do believe that these days, within the games industry, it's sometimes hard to find inspiration because a lot of people have actually been reasonably successful by copying what they've done themselves for the last couple of years, or copying what other people have done and optimizing and tweaking a little bit. And if you're fast enough to kind of throw those games out the door relatively quickly, you can actually make some money with that. It's not our company, it's not your company, it's not our philosophy, but I really do think that inspiration comes from other industries, from other things in life, from experiences you make, from people you talk to. And that's why personally, I think we've touched that topic before in many conversations we had, is that, industry events are sometimes not helpful for that because you don't get the inspiration you actually need. You want to create something new to some extent. And that's very important. So I actually really agree with you on that one. Inspiration usually comes from other fields that are not games. And I'm sometimes a little sad and disappointed that so many people in the games industry don't see that. And they're always trying to recreate something that's already been done. I'm not saying anyone here is.
I want to do a Skyrim GTA clone, whatever. I don't know. And
it's not wrong to, take a couple things here and there. And we talked about like things that have been learned. So you don't have to reinvent the wheel all the time and create controls that have never been there. So if something is learned, you better deal with it. If you know how, I don't know, the mobile space, the App Store works, then you better work around that because that's your framework that you have. But you should get some inspiration from other sources. And for me, actually, it's usually not games, but something else.
But for example, when talking about inspiration, so I think Ultima Online was starting the same time frame than Tibia, for example. That's a German company, Zipsoft. I don't know if you know those guys.
I know of it. I don't know well, but...
So did you play the game then? Because it's, in my opinion, it's quite similar to Ultima Online those days and started, I think, even on the same date. So, so do you play other RPG games to get inspiration for the next titles? Or are you saying, I don't care what the others are doing?
I don't care what the others are doing. And maybe to a fault. I mean, because, by the way, I think there's other really great games out there. By no means do I think I'm not playing them because I don't think I could, would, or should learn from them. I actually think I do too little playing of other people's games if I had to pick one side or the other. But what's interesting is what I like to create and what I like to play are quite different. If I play a game to completion, which means I really enjoyed it, about once every 2 years seems to be the pattern. And between those once every 2 years, I dabble in lots. And so especially with role-playing games, I mean, there's almost no role-playing game. The role-playing game that I didn't write that I've played the most of is probably World of Warcraft. And but most everything else, I play it till I sort of get where they were doing. I say, oh, that's interesting on the user interface, or that's interesting, they did or did not make this level of interactivity, or they did or did not make this level of character AI. And so I kind of go, hey, I get a snapshot of the innovations they've done, and then I'm usually, okay, I got it, and go back to my own things. But I can pretty much name every game I've ever played to completion on my fingers and toes. It's the first game I ever played to completion that I didn't write was Myst, which I think is still phenomenally good.
Amazing.
And this was before the days of the internet, and it was hard to finish. So I had to, we're calling friends, trying to figure out how to get those last few things. And then out of order would be things like the original Medal of Honor, the original Command and Conquer, which also another one of the things like it was phenomenally good.
Great game.
I also played the original Warcraft, although I thought the original Command and Conquer was better. Anyway, and more modernly, actually, a lot of games that I play are even on mobile, and that's just because it's convenient, just because I can. And so I'm level 31 now in Pokemon Go, but there's a lot of other kind of more avant-garde artsy games like Monument Valley.
We love it too.
But there's even games that are mostly text. There's one called A Dark Room. A Dark Room is a phenomenally good game. Love it, but it's just text. There's no.
Have you played Lifeline?
Lifeline, don't know that one yet.
Similar one.
Yeah, so
you played it?
Check it out.
Yeah, that's like you just chatting.
So you're checking out other games here and getting some inspiration there. And I think in the next episode we should talk a bit about your hobbies there, maybe, and
which is where a lot of the inspiration comes from, actually.
Okay. Why did you not make games for Indiana Jones at the end of the day? Because collecting stuff, traveling crazy places,
Well, it's interesting. Well, like